So I decided one morning that I was going to be responsible for a whole day. Big decision, right? Like I woke up, looked at my coffee cup and thought, today I'm a functional adult. First step chores. I figured I'd start small, take out the trash. Simple, harmless, wrong. Somehow I got the bag stuck in the lid. Then it ripped. Suddenly, it's like a confetti party of garbage in my driveway. Neighbors were peeking out of windows, giving me that look that says, "Do you need an adult?" I shrugged like, "No, I'm fine." Just decorating the street with banana peels. Then I thought, okay, if I'm gonna be responsible, should probably help my wife around the house. She asked me to fold laundry. And naturally, I folded all the socks into pairs that didn't exist. One blue sock, one gray sock, one polka dotted sock that I'm pretty sure belonged to the neighbor. And of course, she's standing there watching me. The slow, disappointed blink, I said, "Look, I'm being creative." Then came the cooking. She wanted something simple. Eggs. Simple, I said. How hard could it be? Turns out cracking eggs over a pan is a contact sport. One went on the counter, one on the floor, one somehow in the toaster. Breakfast turned into a crime scene investigation. She sighed, grabbed the broom, and I realized being responsible might be the most dangerous thing I've ever done. By lunchtime, I'm hiding in the living room, trying to look like I'm reading the news while secretly plotting my escape plan. She calls me over. "Can you just handle the bills today?" Bills? Sure, because adding numbers is easy for me. I stare at them like they're abstract art. I ask her, "Do we still have money?" She doesn't answer, just shakes her head. That's when I know I may survive adulthood, but adulthood is definitely not surviving me. I woke up one morning and decided that today was the day I was going to be responsible. Just like that, I made a commitment to myself, which in hindsight might have been the most dangerous decision I've ever made. I sat up in bed, stretched like a man who's about to conquer the world, poured a cup of coffee, stared at it like it was a motivational speech in liquid form. This is it. I said to myself, today, you are an adult. Nothing bad happens because you're in charge. Immediately, I felt this wave of pride mixed with terror because, let's be honest, I'm the kind of guy who once tried to change a light bulb and ended up with a small electrical fire and a very concerned neighbor. But today, armed with caffeine and determination, I felt unstoppable. I even considered writing down a to-do list. I didn't want to overcomplicate things. Being responsible, I decided, was about attitude more than planning. First thing on the list, chores, the trash. How hard could it be to take out the trash? Apparently, very hard. I grabbed the bag, tied it up, and went to lift it. The lid on the trash can had other plans. It didn't just resist me, it fought me like it knew I wasn't ready for responsibility. One tug, two tugs, and then the bag ripped open, sending a rainbow of garbage onto the driveway. Banana peels, coffee grounds, old pizza boxes. I didn't even know I had that many pizza boxes. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, squinting. I gave them my best confident smile, which in hindsight looked more like a man who just lost a small battle with a trash bag. I stood there, surveying the damage, thinking, maybe this is what responsibility looks like. Maybe this is the test. I decided to move on to something bigger. If I was going to be a responsible adult, I couldn't just stop at trash duty. I had to show initiative, creativity, and leadership, qualities I wasn't sure I actually possessed. But in that moment, I believed in myself. I thought about all the times I had failed at small tasks and figured today, today would be different. The sunlight outside felt like it was cheering me on. I took a deep breath, wiped a smear of garbage juice off my hand, stepped back into the house, ready to tackle the next thing with the same unwavering confidence I had felt 15 minutes ago before the trash exploded into chaos. I didn't realize that responsibility isn't just about doing things, it's about consequences, and they're smart, and consequences have a way of finding you even when you think you're prepared. I was ready for the world, at least I thought I was, and that thought alone was enough to keep anyone watching closely, wondering exactly how far I could go before everything spiraled out of control. So after surviving the trash debacle, I thought, okay, small wins, right? Maybe chores are my weak point. Maybe I just need to ease into responsibility. Figured folding laundry would be a good next step because it seems straightforward, like there's no way to mess it up. Grabbed a basket full of socks, shirts, and things I couldn't even identify, and started folding. At first, went fine. Shirts went on shirts, pants went on pants, but then I hit the socks. That's when my adult life started to unravel. One blue sock, one gray sock, one polka dotted sock that, if I'm honest, might have belonged to the neighbor's kid, because how else does this even happen? I tried matching them creatively, like, this is conceptual folding. My wife walked in just in time to witness my masterpiece. She gave me that look, the one that says, I don't even know who you are anymore. I paused, held up a sock triumphantly, said, look, it's experimental. You wouldn't understand. Then I moved on to towels, because towels are big, soft, forgiving, right? Wrong. I folded them like origami, but the origami was sad and confused, like it had given up on life halfway through. I stacked them neatly, at least in my eyes, and stepped back to admire my work. She walked over, touched the pile gently, and asked me why the hand towels were on top of the bath towels. And I said, it's a hierarchy system. It's symbolic. It represents balance in the household. She didn't blink. She just shook her head ever so slightly and walked away, and I could feel the judgment radiating off her like heat waves in the summer. Decided I wasn't going to let this minor setback ruin my responsible streak. Next, I moved to the kitchen, because being responsible isn't just folding laundry. It's also making sure your family survives. She asked me to make eggs. I thought, well, I've watched people make eggs on TV. How hard could it be? I cracked the first egg perfectly into the pan. The second egg, however, had other plans. It didn't go in the pan. It went on the counter, then bounced onto the floor. Looked at it for a moment like maybe it was a joke. Then I cracked the third one, and it went in the toaster. Somehow, this happened. Breakfast became a full-scale disaster zone. Found myself ducking imaginary laser beams from the ceiling as I tried to salvage the remaining egg. By now, my wife was leaning against the counter, sipping coffee, clearly amused, but mostly horrified. And I thought, okay, maybe responsibility isn't about doing things perfectly. Maybe it's about improvising, like some kind of culinary jazz. I grabbed a spatula, tried to salvage the eggs, and in doing somehow flipped one across the room, where it landed in a potted plant. Now there was egg in the ficus, and I couldn't help but admire its natural yolk, like color. Even as my wife gave me that look again, I realized I was officially in uncharted territory. You see, they're smart. When she asks you to do something, it's never just a task, it's a subtle test of your humanity. She asked me to take care of something simple, like folding laundry or making breakfast, and I'd already failed spectacularly. So the stakes were high. She walked into the room, And there I was surrounded by a battlefield of socks, towels, and eggs that had somehow claimed every surface in the kitchen. She didn't say anything at first, she just gave me that look. You know the one, the slow, deliberate blink that carries more judgment than a jury at a murder trial. I tried to smile. Maybe humor would diffuse the tension, but the smile came out sideways like I was holding back a sneeze. She crossed her arms, leaned against the counter, and waited. Now, in Nate Bargatze fashion, that moment alone is funny because it's this perfect combination of calm and chaos. Tried to explain my logic, like why one sock was on top of the pile of shirts, why the eggs were strategically in the toaster, why the towels looked like abstract sculptures, but none of it made sense. She tilted her head slightly, just enough to make me feel like I had to justify not only my actions, but my entire existence. Then came the request that really tested me. Can you handle the bills today? Bills, I stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. Numbers, symbols, parentheses, all mocking me. I asked her, do we still have money? And she didn't answer, she just blinked again. That blink carries a weight, like she's silently saying, you've never managed money in your life, and I trust you even less now. So I did what any responsible adult would do. I tried to look busy while hiding from the real responsibility. I stacked the bills neatly, then stacked them again, like maybe stacking them differently would magically add up to the correct total. Meanwhile, she was just watching. Every now and then she'd comment lightly, like, are you sure that's right? And of course I said, which in my mind sounded confident, but in reality probably sounded like a man who had just discovered fire and wasn't sure if it would explode. And then came the laundry check in. She came back to inspect my folding system, the hierarchy of towels and shirts and socks, and gave me another one of those looks, the kind that makes you question your ability to walk upright. I tried to explain my innovative methods again, but she didn't flinch, didn't laugh, just tilted her head. That head tilt became the running theme of the day. Every time I tried to take responsibility, she was there, subtly reminding me that being an adult isn't just about doing the tasks, it's about doing them in a way that doesn't make everyone around you question why you're allowed in society. Realized quickly that I was walking a fine line between helpfulness and total domestic catastrophe. The audience of one, the one giving me the blink and the tilt, was watching, calculating, judging, and laughing silently. While I scrambled to keep my dignity intact, I realized that escalation isn't just a storytelling trick. It's my life in real time. Every task I tried to complete responsibly seemed to attract chaos like a magnet. The universe was having a very good laugh at my expense. I decided to clean the kitchen, thinking that maybe tidying up would help me regain some control, but no, even that simple task had a vendetta against me. Started with the dishes, stacking plates in the dishwasher with what I thought was precision. But somehow, one plate slid, hit the faucet, and created a water fountain that made me question if I had accidentally installed a geyser in my sink overnight. I grabbed towels to mop it up, only to realize they were the same towels I had folded earlier in a creative arrangement. So now the abstract towel art was being sacrificed to soak up my mistakes. My wife wandered just in time to see water dripping onto the floor and looked at me the way you look at a toddler who's accidentally set the living room on fire, but is smiling proudly anyway. I tried to explain the incident like it was a controlled experiment in fluid dynamics, but she wasn't buying it. Then I thought, maybe cooking lunch would be a safe win. She suggested something simple, grilled cheese. Now, grilled cheese is normally safe territory, but in my hands, apparently anything is possible. I put the butter on the pan. They're smart, but the butter slid off the spatula midair and landed on the counter, which I didn't notice until I slipped slightly and realized the universe had put a tiny ice rink right in my kitchen. I flipped the bread anyway, and it caught fire in a way that made me question if my kitchen had secretly become a pyrotechnic stage. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, sprayed it like I was auditioning for an action movie, and accidentally extinguished the bread, the pan, and half of my dignity. My wife came back in to check progress and just leaned on the counter with a look that could freeze lava. That's when I realized that escalation isn't just about physical chaos, it's about mental pressure. Every simple task I completed perfectly only seemed to invite a new disaster immediately after. I started stacking plates again, but then noticed that one of our cats had walked across the counter, leaving tiny paw prints in the butter and a perfect outline of a tail swipe on my carefully stacked dishes. I tried to shoo the cat, which led to a chase around the kitchen that made me feel like I was on a reality TV show nobody asked to be on. By now, the laundry I had folded earlier seemed almost innocent compared to the carnage unfolding in real time. I realized escalation is this: the more you try to control it, the more the world conspires against you. Grabbed the vacuum to restore some semblance of order, and as I plugged it in, I discovered that the cord had been chewed through, likely by a combination of the cat and bad karma. And I ended up hopping on one foot in hand, trying to look like a professional while probably setting a new record for domestic chaos. I realized that deadpan observation and self-deprecation weren't just tools, they were my survival kit. Everything I had attempted so far, from folding laundry to cooking breakfast to cleaning up a small-scale kitchen disaster, gone wrong in spectacular fashion, the only way to keep my sanity was to narrate it internally like I was a comedian performing to an invisible audience. I stood there in the living room surveying the chaos and thought, well, at least I'm consistent. That thought was the kind of small victory only someone in my position could appreciate. I looked at the pile of socks I had creatively mismatched and thought, maybe this is fashion forward. Maybe people will start wearing one blue, one gray, and one polka dotted sock intentionally. Then I glanced at the kitchen, where the eggs had left what looked like abstract modern art on every surface, and I said aloud, at least the toast isn't involved yet, completely ignoring the fact that the toast was in fact a casualty of my misguided spatula skills. Realized the humor wasn't just in the mistakes themselves, but in how I processed them. Every glance from my wife, every tilt of her head, every sigh that didn't include words was a punchline. And the more I tried to rationalize my actions, the funnier it became if you're watching from the outside looking in. I tried to clean up one more time, grabbed a sponge, somehow managed to squirt soap across the counter in a perfect arc, hitting the cat's tail, which prompted a very dramatic feline leap that sent a cup of coffee flying and made me consider enrolling in a circus just to explain the coordination involved. Couldn't help but comment on it internally like, see, it's not a failure, it's performance art. The juxtaposition between my intentions and the reality of the results became the rhythm of the day. Even started narrating minor events out loud. Here comes another sock, comes another tiny disaster. Each observation was dry, understated, like it was normal to have chaos following me around. And that's exactly what makes it relatable and funny, because anyone who's ever tried to be responsible knows that things spiral. The more you explain them calmly, the more ridiculous it all becomes. At some point, I tried to make a cup of tea. In the process, somehow spilled the tea, the sugar, and maybe half the counter onto the floor. I paused, holding the cup in one hand, spoon in the other, and said, "Well, at least it's only mildly inconvenient." Like that was reassuring to anyone, least of all myself. Each mistake became a story within a story, each glance from my wife a chapter, every attempt at rationalizing my own incompetence a punchline. It's the combination of awareness, self-deprecation, deadpan reflection that keeps the humor alive, and in that moment, narrating my failures in a calm, almost scholarly way was the only thing that made the chaos not just survivable. Genuinely funny, the reality of the day had fully set in. Responsible isn't just about doing tasks. It's a test of endurance, patience, the ability to convincingly look like you know what you're doing when, in fact, you don't. I had already battled laundry disasters, culinary mishaps, and domestic chaos, and now it was the culmination of all of it that made every move I took feel like a high-stakes game. I realized the key to surviving this day was subtle improvisation, because when you're responsible and everything is going wrong, every little decision counts, and if you act calm enough, no one notices the small fires you've started, sometimes literally. I had to navigate the living room, which had become a minefield of socks, stray kitchen towels, the occasional rogue breakfast ingredient that had somehow migrated across the house. I stepped over a trail of egg like I was performing some kind of interpretive dance. I swear my cat was judging me silently from the couch, its eyes full of contempt and disbelief. My wife, as usual, was nearby, not saying anything but communicating volumes through subtle gestures. A tilted head, a raised eyebrow, the quiet exhale of someone who's simultaneously amused and slightly terrified of your capabilities. That's where Nate Bargatze's humor thrives, noticing the tiny human details in otherwise catastrophic moments. Tried to regain some control by tackling the mail, thinking sorting letters and bills would be manageable, but somehow the envelopes multiplied in my hands. One slipped, landed on the floor, bounced under the couch. I had to wrestle it out while balancing a coffee cup I hadn't spilled yet. Small victories count, right? As I bent down to retrieve it, I realized that being responsible involves a lot of stooping, bending, pretending you have a plan when you really don't. I narrated each movement silently, like a sports commentator. Here comes the adult maneuver. Will he succeed? Stay tuned. It made me laugh. Maybe that's what kept me from breaking down completely. Then came the text messages from work, from family, random reminders that I had forgotten birthdays and appointments. Each notification was a tiny earthquake in my world. I had to navigate them carefully while maintaining the illusion of adult competence. At one point, I glanced at my wife, who was calmly folding laundry I hadn't ruined yet, and thought, she makes this look effortless. Make it look like a full survival documentary. And in true comedic timing, that's when I realized every time I try to be responsible, I somehow turn into a one-man slapstick show, performing stunts nobody asked for, dodging imaginary hazards, and desperately trying to maintain dignity while the universe conspires against me. Each small task that should have been simple escalated into something absurd. Every glance from my wife punctuated the story. The audience watching, including you, imagining this scene, can't help but be drawn in, waiting to see what the next step will be how much worse it can get, and whether I will, against all odds, survive the day without completely losing my mind. So by the end of the day, I realized that being responsible isn't really about checking off tasks or folding laundry correctly. It's about surviving the chaos you somehow create along the way. Sat down, looked around at the mess, the eggs, the laundry, the trails of what I can only describe as my version of organized chaos, and thought, well, I gave it a shot. My wife looked at me with that same slow blink, the one that says, I love you. Maybe next time you should just sit down and do nothing. And I had to nod. Because she was right. Learned a lot about responsibility, mainly that it's dangerous, unpredictable, and maybe not meant for people like me. But somehow, even in the middle of the disaster, there's humor. There's a story in every spilled egg, every mismatched sock, every judgmental glance, and maybe that's what adulthood really is, a series of small catastrophes disguised as everyday life. The only thing you can do is laugh while trying not to get kicked out of your own house.